Hello and welcome to Morning Brief Market Sunrise. I'm Ramzan Karmali, live from Yahoo Finance's studios in London. It's Tuesday, 28th October. Coming up on the show, Trump announces a deal with Japan before his crucial meeting with China's Xi Jinping. Amazon announces massive layoffs, and PayPal signs a deal to be the first payment wallet in ChatGPT. So, grab your coffee and let's own the morning. Let's kick off the things you need to know before the opening bell rings by taking a quick look at where US stock futures stand. And US stock futures have kind of hit pause this morning on the heels of notching fresh records yesterday. Okay, the first thing you need to know is that the US and Japan signed a framework agreement this morning securing the supply of rare earth. The president lavished praise on Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, telling her, quote, "Anything you want, any favours you need, anything I can do to help Japan, we will be there." Well, on Thursday, Trump is expected to meet China's President Xi Jinping in South Korea. The next thing you need to know is that Google and NextEra have announced a partnership to revive Iowa's only nuclear power plant. Why? Well, Google needs the power to help power growing AI energy demands. Both Google and American electrical utility giant NextEra saw their shares rise on the news. US electricity use hit a record in 2024, driven by AI and data center expansion, prompting a renewed focus on nuclear energy. And the last thing you need to know is about big losses at tech giant Amazon. The company has about 1.56 million full-time and part-time employees at the end of last year, and Amazon's corporate workforce includes roughly 350,000 employees. Well, Amazon have said that they are going to lay off around 14,000 workers. And earlier this morning, it put out a statement that said the layoffs were needed for the company to stay nimble and strengthen the organisation. Well, before Amazon's update, our tech editor Dan Howley explained the types of workers that are likely to be laid off.
Obviously, that doesn't include things like logistics or shipping, the folks at the warehouses that actually box up your goods. This is the folks who are in offices. And, we've reached out to Amazon, haven't heard back regarding a comment yet. But this kind of is part of an ongoing trend that we've seen in big tech, where they talk about this idea of flattening layers, where you hear a lot about reducing managerial roles and things of that nature so that companies can be quote unquote more nimble. There was an earlier report last week about how Amazon's AI wasn't up to snuff, and part of that was because it had built out so many different layers of organizational structure as a result of pandemic hiring, and so that was making them leading them to make decisions more slowly than they previously had. So this could be a part of that. Again, we haven't heard from Amazon yet regarding that, so it's still unclear exactly what the layoffs are going to impact. But again, this seems to be part of a broader trend in Silicon Valley.
Well, for market movers, we're going to focus on earnings that have just been released again. So we kick off with PayPal, which is not only reporting earnings, the payment platform just announced a major deal with OpenAI. This will make PayPal the first payment wallet within ChatGPT, opening up giant business potential. Shares are surging in the pre-market, as you can see here, plus over nearly 14% now. And in its earnings report, it also beat estimates. Third quarter adjusted earnings per share came in higher than expected, as did revenue as well. Okay, next up, United Health. Well, its Q3 results also beat Wall Street expectations for third quarter earnings, and it raised its outlook for the year too. The company hiked its adjusted earnings outlook for this year by 25 cents to at least $16.25 a share, which is still far below the range set out heading into 2025. Now remember, United Health is trying to win back investors' confidence after a major meltdown earlier this year, which including slashing its earnings forecast, replacing top management and disclosing a federal criminal probe. Okay, Next up is UPS. Its shares are rising in the pre-market as well. Its third quarter adjusted earnings per share came in at $1.74. The street was looking for just $1.32, so a big beat there, and shares up almost 9% in pre-market. Well, revenue also beat expectations, coming in at $21.4 billion. The market was looking for $20.87 billion over Q3. Now, the courier's plans to reshape its delivery network is clearly starting to show results. Okay, next up, Royal Caribbean. It boosted its adjusted earnings per share guidance for the full year, but the guidance missed the average analyst estimate. That sent its shares tumbling in the pre-market, as you can see, down almost 7%. Q3 revenue of $5.14 billion was also slightly below the street call of $5.17 billion. It's worth noting that Royal Caribbean CFO Naftali Holtz will be on Market Catalyst on Yahoo Finance at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, so stay tuned to that. Well as earnings this week, the Federal Reserve is also in focus. Policy members begin their two-day meeting today. Markets are expecting a 25 basis point rate cut to be announced tomorrow. Vishal Kanduja, a senior fixed income portfolio manager from Morgan Stanley, gave Yahoo Finance his take on where the Fed stands right now.
I think the Fed, put simplistically, is in a very tough situation at this point. They don't have clarity on data, at least the data that we and them depend on, telling them about the data dependency or data dependent path that they're on. So I think the next two cuts in this, because I think the October information, whenever it comes out, when the government opens up, is going to be still delayed as well as looked at skeptically. It'll be very difficult to push back from the Fed's perspective, push back on market expectations of how much is priced in till the end of the year. So not only the one coming up this week, but also the next one feels, from our perspective, a locked-in rate cut from the Fed perspective from that end. Now, if you expand that to end of 2026, I think around 4.5, 5 cuts are priced in. The asymmetry of data and the pieces of information that we're getting today, I think the labor market slowly but steadily weakening or tightening, however you want to put it. Also, I think we've started to see in quick succession, I think some bankruptcies that are showing up, smaller in nature, but idiosyncratic in nature from our perspective. But still, I think the financial conditions are starting to get a little bit tighter from that perspective as well. So we do think that they deliver on market expectations, about 5 cuts till the end of 2026.
Okay, we're heading for a short break now, but when we're back, we'll be getting a Japanese perspective on Trump's visit to Asia with Seijuro Takeshita from the University of Shizuoka. Welcome back. Well, President Donald Trump is in Japan, the second stop of his 3-country tour of Asia. Now, he's met with Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi. They've signed a rare earths deal and announced that US missiles will be delivered to Japan. In fact, Trump was full of praise for his alliance with Japan, commending Prime Minister Takaichi on her plans to raise defense spending. Now, remember that Trump's summit with China's President Xi is set for Thursday in South Korea, with a weekend of advanced talks creating optimism for a deal. Well, let's get the view from Japan on this visit. I'm joined now by Seijuro Takeshita. He's a professor at the School of Management and Informatics at the University of Shizuoka in Japan. Seijuro, thanks so much for joining us on Market Sunrise. So how significant is this Trump visit? How's he being received there?
Well, we all know that one of the major thing about, this Trump administration is that they are totally unpredictable. So it's very important for our most important partner, particularly in the field of defense, to make sure that we have a solid, bridge between our two countries. And basically, I think that's what's been done. Today, there's not been real, minute detail about the trade issues and economic issues, which people were expecting, but certainly not. Today, it's a good handshake. It's more than a handshake, which reaffirms, I would say, a wonderful legacy of late Mr. Abe, who's been very good friends with, Mr. Trump and also with Takaichi-san. So I think this is leading to a very good start, which basically gives a reaffirmation of Japanese public's 74% backup on Takaichi-san.
But you mentioned there's not a lot of detail in what's been signed, but the rare earths deal with Japan and between Japan and US. I mean, is it even that significant, considering that China controls 90% of rare earths that are so key for use in electronic components?
It's the other way around. You just answered my answer with your question. Because they do hold that amount, we really need to solidify a camaraderie amongst a free world, because maybe they can control us. We all know that hegemony is a war between the United States and China. China is definitely winning out. They're trying to participate in CPTPP and DPP, all these kind of, I would say, areas that they're trying to basically join in and take away the hegemony from the United States, which is a very big danger sign for the security of East Asia. And obviously what we really need to do is make a clear defense line with Japan and Taiwan and Korea to make sure that we can sustain this, free world, partnership. And it was very important to reaffirm this before, as you just pointed out, Mr. Trump had a meeting with President Xi.
Now, Seijuro, we know that the economic policies of Japan and the economic policies under Trump going forward, they're going to be pretty different. So it's interesting that they weren't brought up. I mean, they did portray a unified front, didn't they?
Yeah, they basically promised for the golden future. And there are lots of, I would say, synergism that could be created. For example, $550 billion investment, a lot of it will be on the defense spending, and Japan will be front-loading 2% target of, I say, GDP to defense spending to GDP to 2%, 2 years earlier than expected. So, Japan is complying with the possible, I would say, request of the Trump administration in many sense. And at the same time, Japan obviously wants to have some kind of a breathing room and much more smoother transition as far as, issues like trade tariffs, particularly on like automobiles. Now, I personally don't find any logical consistency in the number that Trump administration come with in the first place. They might have declined it from 25 to 15%, but even if it's 10 or 5, I still don't get any logical consistency. But that said, it's been done. Late Abe-san used to say, "Hey, it's useless to argue about the deficiency of your opponent. You have to just basically glide with the time." So I think that's exactly what Takaichi-san and her regime is doing right now as we speak.
Seijuro Takeshita from the University of Shizuoka, many thanks for joining us here on Market Sunrise.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that was Seijuro Takeshita from the University of Shizuoka, but now it's time for another short break. We'll be back shortly with today's trending stocks. Now it's time for today's trending tickers, where we start with a look at Apple and companies that operate in its orbit. The big question today is whether Apple will hit that exclusive $4 trillion mark. Obviously, that can only happen if the iPhone maker extends its gains into today's session, and for now, it doesn't seem to be the case. The stock has been propped up lately by the strong performance of the new iPhone 17. But we are also looking at Apple suppliers this morning. Skyworks Solutions, which supplies radio frequency chips for Apple and other phone makers, is in talks to acquire Qorvo in an $8 billion deal. That's according to the information. As you can see here, shares of Qorvo are going strong in pre-market, while its potential buy is in the red. On to another key Apple supplier now. Foxconn shares are rising after the company approved an investment of up to $1.37 billion to build a new AI supercomputing center. Like other hardware suppliers around the world, the iPhone manufacturer is investing heavily into the AI game. Moving on to media, and the potential tie-up between Paramount Global and Warner Discovery has been the talk of Wall Street for a few weeks now. In the latest update from Bloomberg, we learned that Paramount would keep most of Warner intact if the two companies merge, bringing names like HBO and Paramount Plus under one roof. The stocks aren't moving that much this morning, but if you take a step back, you can see that Warner shares are up 145% in 6 months, getting a boost from these takeover talks. Okay, next up, a name you may have never heard of, but you should look into if you're looking for the next artificial intelligence play beyond the mega caps. It's up 250% in 6 months and counting. The company name, Celestica. The major Canadian electronic maker is up more than 8% after a strong performance in yesterday's session. The reason for the rally, a strong Q3 beat. And finally, what would Tesla do without Elon Musk? It's a big question for shareholders this morning. The electric car maker is trading almost flat after closing up more than 4.3% yesterday. Tesla's chair, Robin Denholm, asked shareholders to approve Elon's $1 trillion package when they vote in a few days. She warned them that if Musk doesn't get the package, he may just leave the company. And while Tesla has already reported its earnings and Nvidia will do so later on, the rest of the Mag 7 is reporting in the next 2 days. Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet are all due on Wednesday and Thursday. Here's our tech editor, Dan Howley, again on what to expect.
Obviously we have Microsoft, Meta, Google, Amazon and Apple all reporting. So it's basically like a murderer's row of these companies. I think, for Microsoft, the conversation is going to be what's going on with OpenAI. Where's that deal at that they're working on? They have a memorandum of agreement. They talked about that, or memorandum of understanding. They talked about that in September. This is all related to OpenAI going to a nonprofit to a public benefit corporation, and how that process will work its way out, and what that means for Microsoft's stake in the company, as well as what that means for how much Azure time it spends. Outside of that, we're looking at Amazon. Hopefully we get more information on what they're doing in AI as far as competing with Microsoft and Google. Obviously, Microsoft has OpenAI, Google has Gemini. Amazon doesn't really have anything along those lines. Sure, they have a deal with Anthropic, but Anthropic just announced that they're also working with Google, where Google will provide them with TPUs to train and run their own AI. So, they already had this agreement with Google in place as an expansion of it. So Amazon doesn't really have anything on that level. We also want to hear more about that AWS outage. On the Meta front, we're hoping to hear more about the ad spending, whether AI is continuing to boost that, what that looks like for user engagement. And for Apple, we want to know more about what's going on with the iPhone and the iPhone sales. We had heard that there were increased sales of the iPhone 17 in the US and China versus the iPhone 16 last year. That was in the first 10 days of availability. But some folks, such as Edison Lee over at Jefferies, basically saying that the momentum is starting to slow. And so that could mean bad news for Apple if this kind of upsell in the number of devices that they're pushing out the door when it comes to the pros or even the base models is going to be so important to the actual stock movement. And since they're close to that $4 trillion mark, a good beat could put them over that. We just have to see when they announce on Thursday.
Okay, let's talk about quantum computers. IBM recently said it can run a quantum computing error correction algorithm on common chips from AMD. IBM, which is in a race with Microsoft and others to develop quantum machines, says it's a major step towards commercializing supercomputers. Jerry Chow from IBM explained why this is a big milestone to my colleague Julie Hyman.
We came up with an aggressive path towards a fully fault-tolerant, error-corrected machine by 2029. That was part of our roadmap earlier in the year. Now, a key aspect of making that actually work is fundamentally figuring out where the errors are in a real-time fashion and correcting them. And there's actually a classical computing element of that needs to be done. It's called decoding. And so our news is actually about working out how to use a real-time algorithm in a short amount of time using standard, in this case, AMD Xilinx FPGA chips in order to do that kind of algorithm.
And why is it important that you can use an AMD chip that's already out there to do this kind of work?
Yeah, so this type of decoding work has always been looked at as something that could be very computationally expensive and difficult. And some have suggested that you might need to use large GPU clusters. And we certainly know about the energy and cost implications of using things such as GPUs. And so really this gives us a different way of looking at it, that in fact, with the right type of algorithm, we can do this in a very short amount of time and on much cheaper types of hardware. It's just the beginning, of course. There's still going to be a lot of work to fully flesh out this type of algorithm towards what we need for 2029. But it shows that we can really start to work together with partners such as AMD to develop this kind of future.
And so in 2029, as you mentioned, is the date that you're focusing on. What will happen in 2029? What milestone are you guys trying to achieve? And then what do you do with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting right now. There's so much going on in quantum computing. There are systems already today that we're putting out that are at the 100 qubit scale that are pushing on problems that you can't, in fact, solve classically. Now, the question there is whether or not those are actually applicable for things in the enterprise. In 2029, with Starling, our goal is actually put out a machine which is fault tolerant and error corrected at the scale of 200 logical qubits, which can actually run out to what are called quantum circuit sizes out to hundreds of millions of gates. And that has a significant impact on potentially being used for a lot of the provable advantages that we actually have probably read about or heard about for quantum computing to be applied to in chemistry, in finance, in optimization, and so forth.
Bitcoin. All right, before we go, let's check in on the markets. Now, Bitcoin prices are down this morning, but also quite significantly, gold prices are down to a 3-week low today, firmly below the $4,000 an ounce level. It seems that optimism over easing trade tensions has lifted risk appetite and squeezed demand for the safe haven bullion, while investors now turn their attention to that federal policy meeting that started today. We are all expecting a 25 basis point rate cut tomorrow. Okay, turning to the Asian markets now, where markets were broadly lower as investors digested a new rare earths framework signed by US President Donald Trump and Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. Both the Nikkei and the Kospi in South Korea, they've fallen from their record highs there, but the Nikkei still above that 50,000 mark. Pretty impressive. Okay, European markets now, and they seem to be lacking any real direction right now. The FTSE slightly up in the green, the rest in the red at the moment. They're all sort of hovering around the flat line. Basic resources stocks led the declines as crude oil is also down today as well. One stock of note is Novartis, shares down around 3% after reporting earnings that kind of missed the mark there. And let's have a quick look at the US futures before we go as well. And yeah, they're up a little bit, but they're not anywhere near the sort of performance we saw yesterday. Kind of taking a breather from those hitting those record highs yesterday. Lots to look out for on Yahoo Finance Day. Don't forget, we've got the interview with the CFO of Royal Caribbean. And don't forget, after the closing bell, we'll get results from the likes of Visa as well. Okay, that is it for Market Sunrise for this morning. Stay with Yahoo Finance for continuing live coverage of the markets and your money all day on streaming and online. Coming up next, join Julie Hyman ahead of the market open on Morning Brief. I'm Ramzan Karmali. Go own the morning.